This is Business, Equity, and Opportunities.
Welcome back. Have you heard of Hoosier Boy Greenhouses? The roots were planted in the mid-1800s by German immigrants who moved to Marion County and established truck gardens along Bluff Road. From there, the greenhouses began to emerge, and by the 1940s, the area had the highest concentration of greenhouses in the county, eventually becoming known under the brand name Hoosier Boy. We spoke with the owner of the current Hoosier Boy Greenhouses about the history and how his family is honoring that heritage and keeping the legacy alive.
This is Business, Equity, and Opportunities, running your business day to day.
My name is Paul Schlegel. I've been working here or been a part of this for over 50 years. We started in 1972. It was my father and mother bought this place, and at the time it was a total mess. Nobody thought he should buy it. They were kind of like, the neighbors were like, what does he think? What's he thinking? So he bought it. He was an incredibly talented man. He was able to take this broken down place and rebuild it and turn it into a little business for himself and his family. He had 8 children. It was a lot of sacrifice. My mother wasn't a big fan, but she supported him as best she could. And and so for the last 50 some years, we've been plodding along, trying to continue to build the business. And now I have my middle child is working with me. He's a 3rd generation here, but actually my grandfather in the Cleveland area had his own greenhouses as well. So he would be 4th generation. So that's no joke. It's something that is really a labor of love, and but just determination and working hard. Back in the 1900s, people would start their little farms. They were mainly German immigrants, and they'd come in here and they'd buy their little 2 acres piece of land and they'd start growing outside. And then they'd make a little money and they'd build some greenhouses, and they were growing inside. And what the cool thing was, they would be building their businesses, and they'd need more help. So they'd send a letter to Germany, to their cousins, and say, hey, how would you like to come to America and work for me? And you would maybe have the opportunity to own your own place. And so that's what they did. The cousin would come and he'd work for the gentleman. He would put a little bit of money together, buy his own piece of land. And so this went on for 30 years. And that's how the South Side grew into this truck farming area and greenhouses. And it thrived through the 50s. Came on some hard times through the 60s and 70s with the advent of refrigeration and refrigerated trucks and fuel prices and people getting old and the next generation not being interested. But that is kind of a quick history of what and how the South Side grew, and is one of the reasons too that it was slow to develop, because people hung on to their land. It was important to them. It was their heritage, and still there's people who still own grandchildren and maybe great-grandchildren that still own the land, and they hold that dearly because it's their heritage, it's what they come from, and they all spent their summers working in the greenhouse. And it was hard. It was not an easy life, but these couples, this husband and wife, they'd be working together out in the fields or out in the greenhouses, just turning a living. And they loved it. And they passed that love for it on to their children and grandchildren, even though that they maybe didn't want to do that for their livelihood. Probably shortly after World War II, Hoosier Boy became a brand for Marion County growers. This area was one of the largest areas in the Midwest of producing tomatoes, bib lettuce, things like that. And they had a big impact on the Midwest and where they would send their products, up to Chicago and St. Louis. And they decided to make a brand for themselves, and so they came up with Hoosier Boy. Times got tough and they weren't producing as much and so on, so their influence on the industry or on the market was minimal. And so basically it kind of just faded away. So I have a good friend who is a patent attorney, and I talked to him and I said, hey, can you do me a favor and look up the trademark Hoosier Boy and tell me if it's available. And so he did, and he got back to me and he said, yes, it's out there and it is not being used, and because it hasn't been used for 7 years, you can go ahead and claim it. So I went ahead and did it. I claimed it, and I kind of shelved it and put it on my desk, and every once in a while I would look at it and say, should I do this or should I not? So a man named Bud Brehob, who lives just a little bit up the road, and he's a distributor to all of us greenhouse people with pots and soil and so on. And his father was instrumental on the development of the trademark Hoosier Boy. So I went to Bud and I said, hey, look, I got something I want to ask you. And I said, I want to use the trademark Hoosier Boy and market it as such, but I don't want to hurt anyone's feelings. I don't want to just because many of them were still alive, the people who are using it. He said, I think it would be awesome. He would have breakfast with the guys occasionally, and he says, next time I have breakfast with them, I'll bring it up and see what they say. And so he did that, and he talked to them, and all of them were excited. They all thought, yes, we would love to see the trademark kind of come to life again. And so it was the very next season we started using it. And it's been, ever since then, it's been kind of it's transformed our kind of identity around here. Instead of being known as Schlegel Greenhouse, we're more known as producers of Hoosier Boy.
But that's not the end of the story. We'll share more insights and how the owner is protecting the legacy later in our success story. As you see, the Hoosier Boy brand has gotten a new and exciting lease on life. When we come back, we'll explore how the Indy Chamber's Reentry Entrepreneurship Development Initiative is helping individuals transition from incarceration to building the skills they need to launch their own business.
Running your business day to day is made possible by Indy Chamber.